This channel is only possible thanks to direct contributions from you, the viewers. Seriously, thank you guys. If you'd like to contribute, you can do so for as little as $1 a month on Patreon, or come pick up a t-shirt at the merch store. Links below. Hey guys, in today's discussion of the Homestuck Extended Zodiac, we're going to focus on the quiz itself, and how the way its point system is constructed implies certain possibilities when it comes to the aspect's relationship to color theory. But first, let's break down what that means for those of you who aren't too familiar with the quiz or how it's designed. Here, I'm going to be borrowing the arguments of Katanahime on Tumblr, who wrote out some pretty solid explorations of the quiz's design for other fans. I'm not going to go over all the details like they do, so you can check out the link in the description if you want to know more, but here's the core grist of the argument. Basically, whenever you answer a question on the test, that points you towards a specific aspect, but you also give points to the two aspects next to it, and the aspect across from it, ergo its complement, as well as the two aspects next to that. The aspect that you get on the quiz is simply the aspect that you build up the most points towards, and in the event of a tie, there are certain biases that decide which aspect will win out. That bias puts the aspects on a spectrum from most to least common, with time as the most common and doom as the least common. A lot of fans don't like this, feeling that all of the aspects should have been equally given out, and that the bias makes the test bad or inaccurate to how the aspects work in Homestuck. Personally, I don't really agree. The comic tells us that time and space players are the mandatory members of a successful Spurb session that bears fruit and creates a universe. We have more time and space players than anyone else in the cast, so it makes perfect sense to me that those two would be the most common aspects on the quiz. And Doom being the least common lines up perfectly with how relatively irrelevant and missing Doom players generally are in the plot. So the way the quiz is constructed makes a good amount of sense to me. Anyway, my Patreon Discord community kind of just mulled over the implications of Katanahime's post over the following months, and that eventually led me and my friend Pip to talk about the relationships of the aspects implied by the quiz in relation to color theory. I think Pip describes it better than I ever could, so I'm just gonna read off what they wrote. Complementary colors are already an important part of Homestuck, as with the complementary aspects, and for example, Prospect and Durst being complements, and associated with the colors for just and heroic deaths. For a while, I'd been thinking that groups of 3 adjacent aspects on the wheel might be thought of as expressing other more complex ideas than those of a simple aspect. For example, mind, hope, breath seems to evoke the notion of inspiration in particular, whereas blood, rage, and heart might be something like passion. This would correspond to the use of analogous colors, which are colors that are next to each other on the color wheel and usually match well. To add to Pip's idea of blood, rage, and heart as describing passion, it's useful to consider the slang, "it's all the rage," which is used to describe something that is highly popular for a sharp period of time. Something that is the fashion of the moment, usually a means of performance or self-expression, like fidget spinners, for example. From there, we moved on to considering split complements. In color theory, the split-complementary color scheme is a variation on the complementary color scheme. In addition to the base color, it uses the two colors adjacent to its complement, instead of the complement itself. The color scheme is said to have the same strong visual contrast as the complementary color scheme, but is also said to have less tension. For this reason, it's said to be a good color scheme choice for beginners, because it's difficult to mess up. I decided to dub the relationship between these 3 aspects an aspect synergy, which I used to describe a hazy idea where 2 or 3 aspects seem to be fundamentally entangled in some way. So, for example, with the hope, heart, and blood synergy, consider how romantic relationships are one of the biggest desires many of us hope will have fulfilled over the course of our lives. How our mythology about love extends to a belief in the idea of soulmates, or at least the passionate beauty of true love, and maintaining such relationships, by definition, requires the faith and commitment of both parties. Because of this, society makes institutions to solidify love, like marriage, and the maintenance of society itself relies on the faith of those being ruled and the social order that rules them. Spacebound all greatly benefit from filling their loneliness and isolation with both light and heart. Jade's computer and various other electronics are powered by energy. Jade and Kanaya focus on important information such as that imparted by Skaya or Rose's GameFAQs guide, and stories often provide them entertainment, like Calliope reading Homestuck. They're also fond of fashion and art, in particular that which lets them express their identities to decorate their homes and selves according to the inclinations of their souls, all of which helps assuage their loneliness and boredom. Doom represents restriction and limitation in the physical world, and both breath and light represent coming into awareness of this restriction and then ascending out of it into the freedom and empowerment of the realm of ideas. The successful Doombound tends to seek freedom from suffering, but faces a steep climb. They might be empowered by light's energy, like in Goldblood Psionics, but also face limitations in wielding that power, and exceeding the boundaries of it tends to leave them hurting a lot more than Lightbound would. Rage has a synergy with mind and breath, which I describe with the words performance, frivolity, and the biblical concept of the word as a creative force in and of itself, described by the concept of logos. Rage is linked to acting and theater, which involves careful thought and planning as to how to present oneself on stage. Theater is also linked to breath through the plots of plays and the use of voice and speech in acting. Breath links to the logos, the power of the word, and so to sound effects, and so to both speaking and sound itself. So it tends to be linked strongly to sound effects, which have an impact on the world around them. Rage wields a more limited use over sound that's particularly concerned with meaningless, confusing, and fear or anger-inspiring sounds, such as honks. Life shares a synergy with void and blood. Life and Void share an association with raw physical power. On the flip side, Life's propensity for acting on the world may have them powering over the wills of others, inflicting violence on them by denying them self-determination. And to be clear, here we're using the definition of violence that Mike Rugnetta uses in his analysis of Undertale, which is simply the denial of free choice. Whether this instinct is indulged to harm or help those afflicted, coming into balance requires Life to understand the suffering caused by bondage and entrapment in physicality described by blood, as this would enable Life to understand the impact of its actions on the people around them, and adopt a more empathetic perspective. Finally, we've got Time's aspect synergy with Void and Mind, which describes paradoxes, causality, and the will's ability to change reality. Understanding the inherent irrelevance of paradoxes, i.e. the substance that space is made out of in Homestuck, which are irrelevant according to Buldir because of their innate self-fulfilling qualities, would allow Time to balance knowledge of the future with abstract intuition. Understanding the flow of time as a consequence of individual choices would help Time treat their own choices with due deference and navigate the flow of causality carefully, and planning is instrumental to helping Time avoid self-destruction, as we see with Dave and Terezi's teamwork during Dave's session. That's all of the pairings I've got for now. One last note on this subject is that these color theory relationships also imply that there would be triadic, square, and tetradic relationships between the aspects. I don't really know how to describe any of these in terms of color theory, but I do know how to describe the square and rectangle relationships between the aspects through a different lens, which we'll get to next time when we discuss Argus's theory on the aspect zodiac. Until then, let me know what you think about this theory in the comments. And until then, keep rising. Huge thanks go out to my patrons for making this video possible. If you want to help support the channel and come join us at our awesome and growing Discord community, feel free to join us for as little as $1 a month. You can also find me on the r/Hiveswap Reddit and Discord. That's all for now, so thank you again, and as always, keep rising.